evening and welcome to Cabinet for December. First of all, could I take apologies for absence? Anthony? Councillor Calvin?
Councillor Davis sent her apologies.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, Councillor Kidman's working for them.
She sent apologies for the previous political cabinet, so I think we can carry those forward to him. Item 2, are there any declarations of interest? No? Okay. I will make just an announcement now. You may have noticed there are some new cabinet members present. So the newly appointed cabinet members are Councillor Claire Kidman, Councillor Matthew Packer, and Councillor Matthew Fulton McAllister. We're bringing in fresh expertise, ideas, and passion to tackle the challenges that we face as a city and provide the best possible council services to residents. We're also looking at the portfolios of all cabinet members, so there will be a reallocation of duties amongst the total of 8 cabinet members that we now have. I look forward to working with the entire cabinet, but of course with all the new members on many challenges as we drive forward our ambitious agenda for the council and for Norwich. So we will announce those new portfolios at some point, but I just conclude by welcoming the new cabinet members. Item 3 is public questions and petitions. I believe we have a question on Carrow House from Mr. Neil Hardman. I'm assuming that's you, sir? Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. According to the council website, the Carrow House site was bought for £2.25 million in 2021, and a further £1.4 million was spent on refurbishment so that it could become a centre for economic growth. New Carrow House was opened in September 2022 to provide 5 floors of rental space for businesses. Works on Carrow House and the conservatory were to be completed by the end of 2022. I wonder how much of the office space has been used and is currently being used, and whether the works to the site have been completed for use. If parts of the site are not currently being used, can the council confirm whether there are plans to explore new uses and opportunities, or to open the sites for local organisations and members of the public? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardman, for your question. Carrow House forms part of a larger range of sites across East Norwich. East Norwich is an ambitious project to create a sustainable new urban quarter in the city, and the sites combined form the largest brownfield redevelopment site in the east of England. The council funded the acquisition and refurbishment of Carrow House from a successful bid to the government's Towns Fund in view of the strategic benefits of having substantial landholding within East Norwich that would bring to the wider East Norwich project. The long-term aim being to renovate old Carrow House and enable redevelopment of new Carrow House and the car park associated with the property in accordance with the East Norwich Master Plan. In the short term, the council have now completed a light refurbishment of the building. We're currently working with a new charity which is formed from a local consortium of charities and social enterprises with a view to them taking over the management of the building. This would be a short-term initiative over the next 3 to 5 years, pending redevelopment proposals coming forward. We are still working through the details of this. However, if successfully delivered, it would provide substantial benefit to those organisations and provide substantial social and cultural value to the city. You may ask one supplementary question.
Thank you very much for that response and answer, Councillor. Thank you, that's good to hear that it is being used by a community organisation. I would like to confirm whether that is the whole site, because from my understanding there is New Carrow House, Old Carrow House, apologies so to speak, and then the conservatory. Can I confirm whether the entirety of that site is being used by this charity or whether there are any other plans for it? And yes, that's it, thank you.
Thank you. Mark Brown. Mark, you're going to answer that.
Yeah, I confirm that the current proposal we're looking at does include the whole site.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming and asking a question. We'll now move on to item 5, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 22nd of November. Can we accept those that were there as a correct record? Please. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Item 6 is Scrutiny Committee recommendations. That's on page 23 of your agenda. And I believe this is going to be introduced by Councillor Galvin. You didn't know that? Oh, okay.
I'm very glad to introduce it.
I believe you're the chair of the Task and Finish Group.
Oh, that's it.
Yes, so apologies for that.
No, I'm very glad to introduce it.
Thank you.
When I introduced it to the Task and Finish Group, the first thing I did was to thank the members of the group. It was a cross-party group. So everyone worked incredibly hard over a series of, I think, 5 or 6 meetings, and the other people to really thank the officers who all worked extremely hard with us to review a huge amount of evidence and actually put together something that would benefit the council. So it was our aim to stick very closely to the remit that we were set, and we all worked together to do that. And I think we've come up with a report that is entirely evidence-based. It will be useful to the council, and it meets probably the biggest challenge that we have as a council, which is to retrofit our housing stock so that for both financial purposes and carbon purposes it will be fit for the future. So it's not going to be an easy thing to do, it's not going to be a cheap thing to do, but it's going to be probably the most worthwhile thing we can set in motion here as councillors in terms of our future shared planet and in terms of our residents from the very moment the homes are retrofitted in terms of cash. So yeah, that's what we found out. We took evidence from right across the country. People were very helpful. We had evidence from housing associations as well as other councils, and we had a lot of support from officers. And our aim really was to put together something that would seamlessly support and slot into the corporate planning process going forward. And as I said, it was a cross-party group, and they were all accepted by scrutiny and recommendations. So I really do commend them to you today. And I can ask a question afterwards, after you understand you want to debate it somewhat, but...
Absolutely, you can ask a question, absolutely. Okay, this is new territory in that case, as you just introduced tonight. Anyway, fine, right, okay, so we have it in front of us, and there are a series of recommendations which are in the tables on pages 25 to 29. So, could I ask Cabinet colleagues for any comments or questions? And I'm aware that this report names Councillor Jones and Councillor Hampton because of your portfolio. So, Councillor Hampton.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, first off, I have to thank the members of the Task and Finish group for all the time and effort they put into this, and of course scrutiny as a whole for setting this topic and for considering it again at a full scrutiny meeting a couple of weeks ago that Councillor Jones were really happy to attend and sort of hear a bit more about the process you went through and a bit more context behind some of the recommendations here. And it is of course a really important timely topic in the policy context with the corporate plan being refreshed. So a lot of work is going on environmental strategy and housing to bring a lot of this to the forefront already. And of course, domestic emissions are the greatest source of emissions in Norwich. So this is vital in terms of decarbonising the city, meeting many of our net zero targets. And we can't forget that with the cost of energy having doubled in the past couple of years, and too many of our residents still really struggling under the cost of living and energy crises, the difference this work will make to bring warmer homes and lower bills should really be at the forefront of our minds as well. I know it was throughout a lot of this process. And as I think a member of the committee commented, that this is sort of how a Task and Finish group kind of could and should work. Maybe it's been a better process than some others in recent years. So it was a really productive piece of work. I'll go through some of the recommendations in more detail in due course, but there's plenty here that already aligns to our approach or might be able to slot in and that we support. It is clear that lots of these have quite considerable resource implications, or they need to be considered in quite a bit more detail about. As I say, we have got quite a lot of work already ongoing on this, so some of these recommendations need to be balanced against other work streams and priorities which they could have an impact on, or where they represent a bit of a change from what we're doing. So, and it's also, obviously these relate to the council and lots of different service areas, not just environmental strategy, not just housing, which is right, there's a role for planning and procurement in some of these as well, communities, for the whole kind of scope. As well as companies, and I know NCSL, so getting to grips with the 20 of these and all the implications of what we realistically can and can't commit to at this stage has been a bit of a task. So what I would propose is that can we defer making a vote either way on these recommendations to the next possible opportunity, presumably the next cabinet meeting, to give us that opportunity to talk among ourselves with relevant officers, representatives about how realistic some of these are within resource implications, whether they need to be just tweaked ever so slightly to kind of keep the gist of what it's saying, but just make sure we can actually deliver what's being asked, or are realistic, a bit more realistic about the timescales or where it slots in terms of priorities. So I think Councillor Jones will have some points to make, especially on the more purely housing end of this. So I'll hand over to her.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so it was really fascinating to have the opportunity to hear to attend screening and hear from the Task and Finish group. I would say in terms of the recommendation around the HRA business plan, I don't feel like at the moment that it can. I think we need to be very careful around that in terms of if we're talking about retrofitting, where that fits in alongside a number of other things. We need to be thinking about the results potentially of the stock condition survey that's due.
Councillor Jones, you okay to continue?
Yes. Sorry, so very intent point I was making around the HRA. I think it's really crucial that retrofitting is a key component when we're doing the HRA business plan. That does need to be considered alongside our existing programme of building upgrades, responding to the stock condition survey and continuing to build much needed homes. And I think it's getting that balance. And I think until we've got the stock condition survey results, actually making any firm commitments around what would probably be speeding up the process, which would be have significant financial implications. I don't think we're in a position to do that right now, but I can sort of assure you that retrofitting will be a key component for us, but it's something that will need some further exploration. There are some other elements in this that I need to understand the cost implications for the HRA, and as I support Councillor Hampton in the idea that I'd like the opportunity to discuss this further with my officers and come back on this.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Do any other members of Cabinet have any questions or comments? If not, do you have a question, Lucy? Thank you. Councillor Cowan.
Thank you. Yes, it does follow on rather well from that. I just like to, as a point of information, so you were invited to every meeting. It was a cross-party working group. It was cross-council officers, so it's entirely evidence-based. It doesn't suggest any radical change in sort of other things. So it's about fitting in. But I look forward to what you have to say on that. And this does relate to that. So it's a cross-party group. We had evidence from teams across the council about the challenges of retrofit over the 5 in-depth meetings. One of the key findings that came through very clearly was that the current housing budget commitments will not be sufficient, as you say, to reach net zero for council housing stock by 2050. So the current HRA commitment, as you know, is 290 million. 30-year HRA business plan. And the HRA business plan report that's come to Cabinet today says that a figure of 321 million has now been calculated as to what is needed to get to net zero by 2050 for council stock. So before I ask a question, I just need a clarification. Could you clarify whether that 321 million is the actual predicted cost of all the work that's needed to get to net zero by 2050, in which case could you confirm whether we have the money, or is it an updated version of the 290 million commitment made in the HRA business plan this time last year? So is it 320 million pound predicted cost, or is it 290 million pound commitment, which based on the money we have, obviously, rather than what the cost will be? And if that's the case, what are you actually expecting the total cost of retrofitting to net zero across the council stock to be?
So I'm going to direct that to Bob Granville, who will know the answer.
So it's important to remember that the HRA business plan is based upon a 3-year horizon scanning of what cost we might have to anticipate. So last year, when we did it, the figure was 299. We're now at 321, and that's because there are a number of variables that have changed, which are to do with interest rates, they're to do with a bit more detailed knowledge of the costs of actually undertaking retrofit, and it's always going to be a moving fix. They are not commitments, so to be very clear about that. They are not a committed spend. It's a projection about what we think the investment cost will be. As we go through time, those costs will become clearer. They're better indicators of what we're going to be able to do in the next 5 years than that it's about trying to predict what investment requirement is going to be needed over 30 years.
Thank you. So I think we're looking at the proposal to defer consideration of this for a specific period whilst we can gather some more information and a greater understanding of the resource implications. Because I think we're with you in the spirit of it, Lucy, and as has been said, we're doing a lot of work around retrofitting already, and the impetus seems to be to go further faster, which I understand, but there will be resource implications of many kinds. So I guess what we're saying is that we want to defer it until, Emma, you said the next available meeting. Will that give sufficient time? 17th of January, with Christmas in the middle. February? February. Okay. So what we'll do, is that okay? Okay, so we're proposing, so there's a proposal there, I need a seconder probably. Okay, thank you. All those in favour? Okay, so we'll reconsider it in February with more information available to us. Slightly awkward moment now. There are some of the officers need to go to an important meeting at 7 o'clock, and will need to leave the meeting before the possible end time. But they do need to be here for item 10, which also has an item on the exempt agenda, for which of course the public would need to be excluded. But we do want to bring item 10 forward and look at it now to give them the opportunity to leave immediately afterwards. First of all, are you happy that we do that? And the second thing I need to ask is, do you wish to discuss anything under item 12, which is on the exempt agenda, or are you content for that to remain so that we can discuss item 10 now with the public present? I'm not seeing any. No? Okay. In which case, let's move on to item 10. And that's managing assets in non-housing. It's on page 33. And it's being introduced by Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's come to light that there is actually a typo on the report for today's cabinet meeting regarding the disposal of port properties. There's an error in relation to one of the recommendations, as I shall state later. 84 Upper St Giles should read 82 Upper St Giles, with some disparity also in the text between 72 Upper St Giles and 74. Therefore, the recommendation will be is that the Cabinet is requested to approve the disposal of the assets outlined in the report. 2, to approve the disposal of 215B Woodcock Road, the sum detailed in the appendix. And 3, delegate the acceptance of the most advantageous offer from 2/2A Charing Cross, 84 Upper St Giles, and 74 Upper St Giles to the Director of Development and City Services in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Resources, which of course is myself. I believe actually one of my colleagues, Councillor Paul McAllister, has a question in relation to this report, but I will urge members to agree with recommendations.
I think he might have misspoken.
Oh, sorry,
Councillor. I think it's 84, 82, not 84. Just make sure we sell the right property.
I've got 84 Upper St Giles, it should read 82 Upper St Giles. So,
yeah.
I think I was misinformed.
Councillor Matthew Fulton McAllister.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the officers whether we had looked at 74 Upper St Giles as an option for Lion Homes redevelopment, because it strikes me as being a suitable property for multiple flats that could be used to generate further income for Norwich City Council under the General Fund, especially given the current near embargo on investing in commercial assets. Yes, so the information has been shared with Lion Homes, and the board are considering these the options for these where they've got residential conversion potential.
Thank you, Mark.
And do you mind if I do a follow-up?
Go ahead.
And have Lion Homes indicated that they would be in position to move if we were to approve disposal at this meeting?
Oh,
No.
No, we're above the line.
In a way, whether Lion Homes are positioned to dispose or to agree purchase the property or not is an interesting position, but we still need to make a decision to dispose of it if they were to acquire it. So making this decision today doesn't necessarily preclude Lion Homes, if they wanted to continue to engage with us and then make a future decision to purchase it. And of course, they may need financing and an appropriate business plan from Cabinet in due course to make that decision. But this decision today wouldn't stop any of that happening.
Thanks, Dave. I think that answers everything.
Thank you, Matthew. So, are there any other Cabinet questions or comments? No? Lucy, do you have any questions? No? Should we move straight to the vote then? All those in favour? I have to remember the vote. Carried. Thank you. So let's move back now to item 7, the allocation of better care funding. The report came separately. So, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. So,
now we're trying to run a cabinet meeting here, making important decisions for the City of Norwich, and the interruptions are about a matter not on the agenda, and also a matter which is now a legal process out of the hands of the Council, and therefore not something which this cabinet can have any control over. It's totally inappropriate to try and disrupt the business of the cabinet in this way. And if anybody does attempt to do it further, they will be immediately removed from the chamber. Councillor Jones.
thank you. So since 2015, as a council, we've received allocations from the Better Care Fund, and we use this in a number of ways to support local residents. And the idea of the fund is a local person-centred approach. So when we do this, we spend money that's planned jointly with Norfolk County Council and with clinical commission groups. This comes under three mains of areas. We have the disabled facilities grants that we give to local residents, and those can really successfully be used to both help people leave hospital but also stay and remain in their own homes. It's also the ability to provide housing assistance in accordance with local policies. Also, there's the third provision, which allows for using a portion of the funding of other social care capital projects. And it's in this case that we're looking at this proposal today. We haven't spent all the money, which is quite unusual, to be in a position where actually we've been allocated more money than we've needed to spend, and we've done some amazing work for people, so it's not like we're not spending it. It's a fantastic team doing home adaptations. So rather than be in a position where we might have to give that back, we've done this similarly before where we had affordable warmth grant programme looking at boilers. We're in a position now to spend some of this capital on two projects. And these are sheltered housing schemes, and they will help with the development of these. The first phase is at the Great Hospital, which is going to provide, that money will go towards the independent living accommodation. And given that there's needs analysis that says that Norwich needs 245 units of specialist housing to meet the needs of the population going forward, I think any investment we can make in that is really important. So the money we'll be providing from the Better Care Fund will support with increased cost of the development and provision of assistive technology. I think as we can all agree, helping people stay independent as long as possible is really, really important. The second project that we'll be able to support with this fund will be at Webster Court, which is a current project of 32 units of accommodation for people with mental health care and support needs who've previously been street homeless. Providing this extra funding will allow supporting the development of 4 additional units of accommodation. The County Council is also committed to capital funding for this project as well. And this is about supporting some of the most vulnerable members of society. And I think particularly my sort of work hat on having anything that focuses on specialist provision around mental health. We have a limited amount of it, and there's always challenges in finding appropriate accommodation for people with extra support.
Councillor Jones, have you concluded your speech?
I think it would be straightforward if we could just put this to a vote. I would hope that my colleagues can support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from cabinet colleagues? Councillor Galvin, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you, yes. So the use of underspends for the disabled facilities grant is, for other housing schemes, is in line with Better Care Fund guidance, as you say, and the proposal to use this funding for independent living and extra care housing for the groups of people identified in the paper is good practice, and I'm aware there is a need for both types of accommodation in Norfolk. There's no national or regional framework evaluation of projects funded by the Better Care Fund, but it will be helpful to consider whether or how this work will be evaluated locally. The grants are supposed to be used, as you said, to adapt existing housing to meet people's needs, to keep them safe and independent at home, or to facilitate safe discharge. So we know that in many areas around the country, demand for this grant exceeds allocations. So it would be helpful to understand in more detail why there has been an underspend here. And I imagine you have looked into why the money has not been spent. What have you found out?
There were some implications from COVID in terms of planning of works, I know previously, but we've had this consistently, that actually we've had a fantastic programme of work going on. But I would say there are 3 ways that we can allocate this money, and one is around social care capital projects. So it's not that it's not appropriate use of Better Care funding, but we are, our home improvements team, from recollection, has won awards. Actually, they're incredible in their turnaround of work. So I'm very confident that they're always looking for new things to deliver. Seeing some really successful work reaching out towards things like discharges from mental health units as well. So they're always looking and exploring new options spend the money. It's really impressive work done by the team. I'm very proud of them.
Thank you. So do we move to the recommendations, please? All those in favour? Thank you. It's unanimous. So we move on now to item 8. That's the provisional 24-25 budget and medium-term financial strategy, and that is Councillor Hendrick.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I think first of all I need to put this into a kind of national context. Almost 1 in 5 council leaders and chief executives in England, surveyed by the Local Government Association, think it is very or fairly likely that their senior finance officer will issue a Section 114 notice this year or next year due to lack of funding to keep services running. Now, Section 114 notices are rather inappropriately called by the press bankruptcy, or so really a commercial company can go bankrupt when its liabilities outstrip its assets, and also the local authority has the assets of its residents. But it is, of course, a severe financial shock. It results in large-scale cutbacks and a big hike in council tax, and having to pay back to the government. For example, in Thurrock, 35% of the much larger, higher council tax that we residents now have to pay simply goes into interest payments back to the government. The Local Government Association estimates that councils in England face a £4 billion funding gap over the next 2 years just to keep services standing still. But last month's autumn statement failed to provide the additional funding needed to protect those services. What has happened is that since the Tory took power in 2010, we've seen council's core spending powers fall by 27% in real terms at a time of rising demand for services. The Local Government Association says the government urgently needs to use the forthcoming provisional local government financial settlement, which we will not know until next week, to provide councils sufficient resources to set balanced budgets next year without having to make drastic cuts. Sean Davis, the chair of the Local Government Association, said, quote, "The lack of funding for local services in the autumn statement has left councils facing a growing financial crisis. No council is immune from the risk of funding running into financial difficulties, as our worrying survey shows. Many now face the prospect of being unable to meet their legal duties to set a balanced budget, having the 114 reports, Section 114 reports issued. Local government is the fabric of our society, with councils providing hundreds of services that our communities rely upon every single day. For many people, these services are a lifeline. Now, I'm very glad to say that here in Norwich, the situation is somewhat brighter. This report outlines the initial position for the council's general fund situation in the financial year 24-25. Also, the Housing Revenue Account and Capital Programme, as well as an update on the medium-term financial position. It's unfortunate that even at this late stage of the budget setting process, the government has not announced the provisional local government's financial settlement, so these figures in this report can only be based on our best estimates. These proposals will form the basis of a public consultation on the budget, with the results being available to inform the final process before the budget is presented to the Council for approval in February. A report from Cabinet in July this year set out an updated financial position, with a projected budget shortfall of about £3 million over the life of the medium terms in the financial year 28-29. This reflected the impact of the continuing inflationary pressures are having on the Council, funding not keeping pace with the rising costs and additional demand in services. Although inflation is now falling, it remains at levels not seen for decades. The base rate remains high as the government tries to address the extraordinary inflationary pressures caused by last year's disastrous mini-budget, which collectively continues to have an adverse impact on the City Council, our residents, businesses and partners. In the words of the Local Government Chronicle recently, an above inflation settlement will not be in any way that way for many authorities. It's clear the pressure in social care authorities, adult or children's services, will be priorities, and that the City Council will not receive adequate recognition of the very real pressures we are seeing, particularly in respect to homelessness and temporary accommodation. but also across a wide range of services we provide. However, as always, we recognise that our role is to set a balanced budget with the resources we have, rather than what we would like to have, or those who think we should have. Many of you will be aware of the extensive consultation exercise that is taking place on the corporate plan and the associated priorities. To enable a focus on that and to ensure that we will be able to respond to the outcomes of that work, we have focused on 5 key themes: the budget, our budget, and the medium-term financial situation. These themes are set out in today's report, but rely on delivering our existing approved savings proposals from earlier budget process, a focus on ensuring non-statutory fees and charges recover full costs, ensuring that our processes for the recording, collection and recovery of income and debt are robust, maximising the returns from our substantial asset base through a programme of review, investment and disposal as appropriate, and continuing the good work of our treasury management activities. Collectively, the work undertaken on these strategic options indicate that the overall budget cut over the medium term of about 7.9 million can be offset without losing reserves. Once again, the Council has delivered against the odds, and once more it's in a strong position to respond to the priorities of this city and deliver outcomes coming from the corporate plan consultation through our day-to-day delivery resources, but also through our capital investments as required. A council tax increase of 2.99% is proposed, which is below the level of inflation. Our current assumptions collectively allow the council to balance its budget without the need to draw down on reserves. There are several areas where estimates will need to be updated ahead of the final budget proposals in February. Details of the housing revenue account budget position are provided in section 3 of the report. The housing revenue account budget proposals include a proposed rent increase of 7.7% in the financial year 24-25, reflecting the current formula of CPI of September plus 1% in line with the government's current rent standards. This increase in rents is needed to fund the council's obligation to reach energy performance certificate level C and net zero carbon emissions over the medium term. Its ambition is to continue to build new council houses in response to demand, alongside the increasing need to invest in existing homes. The housing revenue account business plan will be covered by Councillor Jones in a separate report on this agenda, and this shows the imperative to raise the level of resources necessary to address these challenges. The budget consultation will be available to access online through our website and will run until the middle of January, providing ideal opportunity to hear your views on our budget proposals, and I would like to encourage everyone to complete the consultation so that it fully informs our final budget position in February. I think that we should state that this much stronger financial position than most local authority base comes is, I think, largely due to 2 factors: I think the excellent work that our officers do and the sound financial management that this Labour administration has provided over the last decade. It was the case in the first decade of this century that Norwich Council had severe financial difficulties, and there were black holes of about £3 million and various other things. Those days are well and truly over. And even despite the austerity of this Tory government, we are still in a better position than many local authorities. But that is in the context that the overall situation for the local government sector is so bleak. I therefore urge members to agree the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick, and I would just echo the comments you made about the sound financial management, the hard work of yourself and Alan Waters when he was responsible for finances, but also the work of the officers over that 10-year period, which has put us into the position which we currently are in, but we still have to work hard to maintain that position, as we know. Are there any comments or questions for Councillor Kendrick? No. Lucy, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Stannard. Can I, in the past I've been allowed to ask 2 questions on this item, one on the general fund and one on the HRA.
Yeah,
is that all right?
It's fine, yeah.
Because there's quite a lot in one item, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the HRA is actually item 9.
I know it's in there as well, but I've got another question to Sorry. I mean,
If there's a
one's
dry
very
question,
short,
go on.
one's a bit longer. So I'll do the longer one first. So it's a general fund question. The council's benefited, as we heard, from higher interest rates, and therefore has an extra £1.7 million in cash available, which wasn't allocated or planned for. However, the administration has decided not to spend this, for example, on one-off improvements to frontline services, but rather put it into reserves. Officers have told us this is to be able to respond to the corporate plan consultation. Can you explain exactly what you mean by that? Because I will find it difficult to explain to residents why £1.7 million hasn't been spent, for example, on improving contact time, street cleanliness, homelessness services, or other vital services without any details on what is now earmarked for.
So, Councillor Kendrick, did you want to respond to
Well,
that?
I probably I'd like Bill to respond in the first instance, and I will come back to the next point.
Yeah, I think first of all, the figure that's set out is an increase for treasury management of 0.4 million. So I don't think it's the 1.7. Not quite sure where that came from. Happy to pick that up. Yeah. I think again, given the corporate plan consultation is in progress at the moment, it would be my advice that there will be some changes required, and it's important that there's some one-off money to help facilitate that work when it comes to fruition. So it's part of that planning for that eventuality that we would want to hold that resource in our reserves for that point in time.
So we had that Councillor Calvin's magic money tree wasn't quite as large as she thought it was.
Okay, you had a second question, Councillor.
Yeah, so this is about the Norwich standard. I can show you where that comes in. Just come out, yeah, so do you agree that the Norwich standard, which seems to be based on time rather than efficiency or accessibility, is out of date and needs replacing with the renewal of the corporate plan?
Bob, do you want to take that?
So the Norwich standard is built off the back of the Norwich standard is built off the back of the Decent Home Standard, so it's an enhancement on the Decent Home Standard that was introduced in 2010. At the present time, the government is working its way through developing a Decent Home Standard 2. When Decent Home Standard 2 is issued, there would be the appropriate time for Norwich to revisit its own standard and say, well, actually, is Decent Home Standard 2 sufficient, and therefore stop there? Or does Norwich want to enhance above Decent Home Standard 2 and then go forward from there? So, and the government has delayed its release of Decent Home Standard 2 for at least 12 months now, so it's not something that's going to be remedied in the immediate future.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, it's a question for the Cabinet member, really, to see if you agree with that about the Norwich standard that it does need replacing.
Councillor Jones.
I don't echo what Bob has already said, that everything is subject to review, and we're looking forward to hearing the outcomes from the government's review of that, and then we'll inform decisions based on that.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So, if there are no other questions or comments, should we go straight to the vote on the recommendations and all those in favour? Thank you, it's unanimous. And then item 9 is the HRA business plan and budget 20. It says here 25-24. I think it means 24-25. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. Just trying to juggle things. So I'm really pleased to be able to bring forward HRA business plans, first time I've done it. I think, it's about our ambitions for our stock, and it's more than houses, it's about people's homes. So I'm really glad that we're talking about this as a separate document, how important this is. And I think we need to understand the complexity of this. I probably was someone who previously saw the HRA side in the bottom as a bit of money, but I think when you look at the funding of this, this is a very carefully balanced thing that we need to get right in terms of how we're planning for the future with the HRA, and about the needs of both our current residents and our future residents, and it's why we plan this over the long term. We've got a number of different things to consider when we're looking at this. We've got both new homes we build, we've got the upgrades to current homes, we've got things like retrofitting, we've got the compliance work we've done, and that I'm incredibly proud that we have received a letter that said that as of 9:30 this morning, they have now, the regulator has now taken the decision to discharge the voluntary undertaking, which had been accepted under the Housing Regeneration Act, and that they're removing this regulatory notice. So I think, you know, we've done some amazing work on that. I'm incredibly proud of all the officers involved in that, and also my predecessor, Councillor Harris, for her amazing work on that. And I'm really looking forward to just taking forward that same way of working to address other issues, so particularly where we're looking at things like damp and mould and other challenges that we face. We also need to be conscious of our ageing housing stock and our responsibility towards maintaining that. So all of these things come together with the need for probably a lot more money than we sort of think we maybe have, but actually we have suffered from the imposed rent decrease over a number of years, which actually then has made the situation more challenging. But that said, we are ambitious for our housing in this city, with over 14,000 council houses, and we look to add to them. They are challenged by right to buy, but you know, we've got a plan for 258 more currently, and I think, you know, it shows where our ambition lies. But as I said earlier, when we talked about the screening recommendations, it's getting that careful balance of improving current properties and building new ones when we've got over 4,000 people needing on our housing list. I'm not going to go into this too much more because I'm sure I will say far more in the future, but I think one of the big things is this is a starting point. We've got a stock condition survey that we'll be receiving, and I think I'm someone who personally always likes to be evidence-based, and that's going to give us the really robust information to plan how we go forward, what's the future for our housing stock, and where do we need to prioritise that, and it may mean some difficult decisions, but at least we'll be basing it on actual evidence, which I think is crucial. So I look forward to how we develop that going forward. I'll leave it as that. I hope, bear with me, I think I've said enough this evening.
Thank you, Beth, and you are now the proud guardian of our housing revenue account, and we take the point it is not a bottomless pit, of course, and needs managing very carefully. It's complex. So thank you for the report. Are there any questions or comments from Cabinet colleagues, please? Everybody's happy. Okay, Lucy, Councillor Galvin, do you have a question, please?
Thank you, yes I do. Just to come back to that £321 million figure, just wanted to clarify, is it based on what we've got or what we need? So is it extrapolated, was it worked out from what the budgets were or what the actual cost of the retrofitting will be? They're two quite different things, I'm sure you appreciate, and we need to get to a robust understanding of where it's from, that number. Thanks.
So, as I stated earlier, the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan is a projection forward of what we know based now, so what we do know now, and projecting that forward to see what that might then need in the future. So we have some indicative costs now that say how much the retrofit will cost for an individual unit. We multiply that up, we put that into the programme, and we say, okay, so when we do the delivery, how does that work? It's a forecast, it is not a commitment to resource. It's an estimate, and it will always be an estimate. Every business plan is an estimate of what will happen in the future.
Thank you, Bob. That's really, really helpful. If there are no other questions or comments, then we can move straight to the vote on the recommendations. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. And that is the end of the meeting. Thank you, everybody, and see you again very